Hi, I'm Don Latarski, and thank you for joining me for installment number 2 on Guitar Theory Illustrated. If you went through the last lesson, you learned about the caged system, C-A-G-E-D, and the 5 octave shapes that are contained within those. I want to review those real quick here with you. Starting with the C chord played this way. The octave shape out of that form is on string 2 and string 5. And now if you play C chord like this, using, this would be called the A form, the octave shape switches to strings 5 and 3. And then if we play the C chord using the G shape, it's like that. This is probably the one that's the least familiar to you. The octave shapes are on 1, 3, and 6. The next one is the E form, which is the most common on the guitar, and it takes the shape of that there, standard bar chord. The shape is here. There's actually 2 shapes here. 6 to 4, and then 4 to 1. You can play it like that with a little bar shape. And the D form of the C chord is like this. And the octave shape is on 4 and 2. Today's lesson involves learning the major scale and the formula for the major scale and what intervals make up that particular scale. The major scale in music theory is by far the most important because everything is referenced back to the major scale. And you'll see how that works as we go through subsequent lessons. Every single scale has a formula to it. The major scale is the easiest formula to remember because it's just the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then the number 8 is a repetition of the root note of that scale, which is the root note is always 1. Now, there are only 2 different intervals that make up the major scale, and the 2 different kind are half steps and whole steps. The half step interval, here's a C note. I'm going to start from C right here at the 1st fret because we're going to build this scale on 1 string. A half step is just the distance from 1 fret on 1 string to the next fret higher in pitch on that same string. And the whole step is just 2 half steps put together. So we're going to go from here up to there. That's a whole step. So the major scale consists of 2 whole steps. So we'll start from here and then we go up 1 whole step. And we go up another whole step. And then we have our first half step, which is between the 3rd and 4th scale degrees. Then we have a whole step between the 4th and 5th, between the 5th and 6th, between the 6th and 7th, and another half step between the 7th and the 8th scale degree. So that's the distance of an octave from this C. You ever heard that tune that goes? It starts with an octave. In this case, I'm playing the octave of the C here instead of way up here. It's the same note, see? The C major scale is the only scale which contains no sharps or flats. Again, it's just the white notes on a piano keyboard. So let's talk about the intervals that are within the major scale. We can compare intervals within a major scale from one note to the next. We've already done that actually. We know that there's a whole step between 1, 2, 2 and 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, 6 and 7, and the half steps, of course, are here between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. What's more useful is to look at the intervals as they're constructed from the root note of the scale. In other words, from the 1st scale degree. There are actually 2 different aspects to every interval that you're going to find. There's a numerical value, which is expressed with obviously just a number, So if we have an interval from the first scale degree to the second, that would be called an interval of a second. From the first up to the third, we would call that an interval of a third. The other aspect of an interval that's important is what's called the qualitative aspect. And the quality refers to things that we describe as major, minor, perfect, augmented, and the last one is diminished. The two most important ones at this point are the major intervals and the perfect, because the major intervals are in the major scale and perfect intervals are in the major scale. The other three interval qualities are derived by modifying major intervals and perfect intervals. Major and perfect. And I express these with just a large M, like if we were going to talk about a major second interval, we would put M2. Or if we're going to talk about a perfect interval, like a perfect fourth or perfect fifth, we'll just call it P5, P8, etc. The interval between the first note and the second note in a major scale, first of all, the numerical value of it is a second, and the quality of it is major. Let's look at what the major second interval looks like on the guitar. It can assume a number of different forms. And this is going to be our challenge. For every one of the intervals that we're going to learn, we're going to have, generally speaking, about 3 different shapes associated with it, depending on what string groups we're on. Now, you can have an interval that exists just on one string, and this one certainly does, and it's very easy to play on one string. I'm going to start on a G note here and just play an interval of a major second. And that's the same interval shape no matter what string I'm on. This is always a major second. A major second can also span 2 different strings. For example, instead of going from G to A here, this note exists also as an open string, number 5. So this shape is also a major second. Let's make that a movable shape. I'll change fingers, slide this up 1, there. That's a major second. So that's a major second interval shape too. Now that shape remains constant across the fingerboard until we get to strings 2 and 3. See, it stays the same, but the distance between strings 2 and 3 is a little bit closer together. It's a half step closer than between all the other string combinations. So we're going to find, and this is going to be the case for every interval, is that when string 2 and 3 are involved, the shape is going to change slightly. I hate to do it to you, but that's just the way the guitar is tuned. So instead of a major second looking like this, it's now going to look like this. So this is a major second between strings 2 and 3. Now when we get back to strings 2 and 1, we resume the same shape that we started out with, which is this one. Okay, let's just review that real quick. A major second on one string, a linear version of the major second, very easy. Just skip a fret in the middle. When we look at a major second interval across contiguous strings, in other words, strings that are right next to each other, it's going to assume a different shape, like that. Now here's the new shape between strings 2 and 3. Okay, what I've got here is the linear form of the major second. And now let's assume that this is the new root. Let's just stick it anywhere in here. And now we're going to put a whole step, or the major second interval, between strings 3 and 4. But remember, this shape is going to stay constant all the way across the fingerboard until we get to strings 2 and 3. And here I've placed it here. It doesn't matter what frets I'm on, by the way. It's the shape that's important, because this shape is going to get moved up and down the fingerboard. Now these are important fundamental building blocks for all of our subsequent chord construction, scale construction, arpeggio construction. Very important stuff. Let's go to the next note in the major scale. And that would be from, now we're going to compare the interval from the root, from 1 over to 3. It also happens to be a major interval, so we'd call it a major third. Let's take a look now at the 3 forms of the major third interval. Okay, let's go up from here, put the third in on this one string. We can play a linear form of that interval from here up to here. I'll remove the second now. So there's a major third. It's not that hard to play. It's a bit stretchy. Always stays the same. Linear form of the interval is really simple. But let's see what happens to it here. Let's grab a third. This has to be here, right? Because the distance between the second scale degree and the third is a whole step. So I can take this away, and now I'm left with that. And that same interval, when it gets moved up, or when it gets positioned on strings 2 and 3, becomes very easy to play straight across. I'll remove that. So there are the 2 forms, there are the 3 forms for the major third interval. Here, linear form, and then this slightly diagonal form, and then this straight across form between strings 2 and 3. One last thing, and that is any interval that spans an octave or less is called a simple interval. The compound intervals are the ones that span a distance greater than an octave, and that will be your 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, and 13th intervals. Thanks for sticking with me through lesson number 2, and I look forward to seeing you back here real soon.